Good morning, guys. How is everybody today? I'm sorry I was late. Shock. I know you're so surprised that I forgot to write down where we left off yesterday. Hi, I'm Debbie. Welcome to my channel, and I'm a scatterbrain. I wrote down the timestamp, but not the part we were on. So that doesn't really help a lot. Judy, do you have trivia for us this morning so we can move away from my incompetence? Oh, Cher. That was not on my bingo card. Cher has recently made serious allegations against the late music producer Phil Spector. She claims that Spector acted weird around her and made inappropriate advances when she was just 15 years old. Spector allegedly made several inappropriate advances towards Cher. She recounts that he asked her to go out with him, which she declined. Spector persisted, asking if she wanted to go to bed with him. At 15? Good Lord, man. Dude. Hey, Jill. Yeah, he's just gross. Are you talking about Laura Owens? She renewed her protective order? Hey, Nancy. Man. So we're going to do... Are they going to stream her trial? Like, she hasn't took a plea deal or anything, right? Somebody will stream it. I'm sure Dave Neal or somebody. At least we'll get to watch it. I'm not going to stream it from somebody else's channel, but at least somebody will stream it. We'll get to see it. That woman, I swear. I've not stayed on top of it, but I know Why are you apologizing, Nancy? Yeah. She's a special kind of evil. I don't know why people think they can get away with doing stuff like that to people. It's just awful. Awful, awful, awful. I watched some of the stuff that Law Talk with Mike had on, and then I think he did a stream with Dave Neal. But I haven't followed it super close, but oh, Nancy, that's okay. That's fine. Why is my coffee always cold? Why? Because I always forget about it. That's why. I make it and then I forget I made it, and then half an hour later I realize, oh, I made coffee. I need to go put it in the microwave. Hey, Teresia. Okay, I am not 100% sure. This is where we were. They were talking about if the bullet transected her spinal cord, I think.
Talking about more than 2 cord diameters of axons that are so fragmented and so damaged it would be impossible for them to conduct any impulses.
First of all, as a matter of housekeeping, Omegan, spelled O-E. What you're saying, doctor, is that this bullet traveled, let's just take a round figure. One of the other forensic pathologists kind of threw out the number.
Oh, hey, it's it's National French Fry Day. So I need some French fries. I'm gonna do some research and see if McDonald's is giving them away. With a purchase, they might.
Yeah, they still charge a full price.
No, I don't think so. There'll probably be a free purchase with a burger. They should, right? It's National French Fry Day. I bet they do. Well, it might be on the radio. You haven't listened to the radio yet this morning. It might be. I'm gonna look. I'm gonna Google it. Me too. Bye. They should, right? Right? It's National French Fry Day. McDonald's should be giving them away with the purchase of a burger. Shouldn't they? Like... And I don't know if we're on the right clip, guys. I really don't. But let's just go from here.
900 feet per second. A bullet traveling 900 feet per second, transecting her spine, did enough damage and was so violent going through the back of her.
What, Nancy? Do you have to work today? Are you going to have a busy day today at work?
Throat, through the soft tissue, hitting the spine, cracking or fracturing the bone, cutting through the spinal cord and slamming into the back of her skull, that it literally, even though it hit her skull where my finger is, it fractured her skull above the occipital bones, correct?
No, this is up in the frontal area.
Sorry.
So it would be it would be the roof of the orbits.
And there were fractures, 2 fractures all the way up here, correct?
Yes, sir. And the important thing there, based on Carter's work, which I have not referenced for you, but it's one of the classic series of 2 articles that deals with gunshot wounds to the head. He made a very important and strong...
McDonald's, Wendy's, Shake Shack, Sonic, Sheetz? I never heard of Sheetz. Taco Bell, Fat Burger, never heard of Fat Burger. Burger King, Hardee's, Good Time Burgers and Frozen Custard, Del Taco, Smash Burger. No Five Guys, Nancy. You're good.
Point about this, that if you have remote fractures that are separated from the fracture lines caused by the main gunshot wound path, in other words, there's intact bone between the gunshot wound path fractures and these remote fractures, as occurred in this case, it's a clear indicator of secondary overpressure effects, which means there was definite injury, widespread. The entire intracranial cavity was affected by the gunshot wound.
And that damage was so widespread. Let me rephrase that. The damage was widespread, given the violence of the bullet transecting her spine and hitting the back of her skull. Yet, in order to believe that the spinal cord was only partially
Oh, wait. Hardee's has a fry pass with any purchase of at least $5, which gives you free fries once a day through the end of the year.
transected rather than fully or completely transected, one would have to believe that that bullet doing all this other damage transected the spine like a...
Wait, we were talking about food now. Forget the trial. Yes, Taco Bell has nacho fries. They're very, very good. They're just French fries you dip in nacho cheese. And they're kind of cheesy themselves, too. They leave your fingers kind of red. I don't know what they, dust them with. But they're really good. Okay, I want to...
cookie cutter, just perfectly, such that some of those hair-like fibers, those axons that you're talking about, remained intact going down the spinal cord. It cut everything else out, did no damage to those axons or those fibers could continue to carry messages from the brain to the rest of the spinal cord. That's what you'd have to believe that she continued to breathe for 2 to 4 minutes after her spine was transected, correct?
If I had Dr. Bowden's thesis correctly, that's what I would have to believe, and for the reasons that I've given, I can't believe that.
That is not medically reasonable based on your experience, your education, your background, your training, and the medical literature that you've reviewed, correct?
Correct.
As a matter of fact, to take one other point that you made, you said that Omikin did seminal work in this area where he indicated and proved through his work that when a bullet, let's take a bullet this big, goes through the spinal cord, it's not going to just do violence to the area that it hits that's that big. It's going to be about 2.5, 3 times the size of the bullet that suffers trauma all the way down the bullet path, correct?
Yes, and the first is due to the permanent cavity effect, the crushing effect that you see, the obvious path of the bullet. The second effect is the temporary cavity effect, which occurs in central nervous system tissue with gunshot wounds of sufficient, force. And obviously the force in this case was sufficient to do that.
It's for the record, he was describing his hands, and they would look like they were 6 inches apart. I don't know what you'd call that.
Well, the first thing I did when I said...
The physical description was, but the verbal description was clear as to how big it actually was. 2.5 to 3 times.
Thank you.
I understand. Yeah.
All right.
Basically, in your opinion, it is unreasonable to believe, medically unreasonable to believe, that even if there were axons or these fibers, fractions of a millimeter from the bullet wound or bullet path, they could have acted in normal capacity to carry synapses, to carry messages from the brain to the rest of the body to continue breathing. It's not medically reasonable, in your opinion.
In my opinion, no.
Based on what we've talked about yesterday and today, is it your conclusion, number one, that the spine of Miss Lana Clarkson was completely transected?
I believe it was completely anatomically transected, and even if I was willing to give the benefit of the doubt that there might have been a few fibers there, my opinion is they were so fragmented, fractured, torn apart, it would have been impossible for them to carry any messages or conduct impulses.
Number two, is it your opinion that Miss Clarkson would have experienced no spontaneous reflex movements?
That's correct.
Is it your opinion and conclusion that Miss Clarkson would have experienced no decerebrate rigidity?
I do not believe so.
Is it your opinion and conclusion that the focal blood that was found in the alveoli and the weight of the lungs was not, in fact, from breathing, but rather a product of one of 3 or all of 3 mechanisms, including gravity and movement, heart failure, and neurogenic pulmonary edema?
I don't believe she could have been breathing, and therefore I offered these other 3 known mechanisms as ways that the observation of blood in the lungs and increased weight of the lungs could have occurred.
And finally, doctor, is it your opinion that Lana Clarkson, after she suffered the gunshot wound that you saw, she could not breathe, cough, spit, sneeze, anything?
No, sir.
I asked that in a double negative, so I'm going to ask you to clarify that. I asked, is it your opinion? And you said no. What is your opinion as to what?
Based on the location of the wound and the findings in the neuropathology exam that I documented in my report.
Once her spine was transected by that gunshot wound, all spontaneous movement would have ceased, correct?
Certainly everything below the level of the lesion and the brain injuries that simultaneously occurred would certainly indicate that apnea would have been very likely to have occurred even if the spinal lesion had not been there.
If her hands had been up, the only movement might have been the dropping of her hands, correct?
Flaccidity is what is described, and while I've not been present at the dozens, if not hundreds of patients that I've seen with spinal cord injuries, by the time they got to the hospital, they had a flaccid paralysis. That's what's described in the literature. Flaccid means limp. They would just drop, loss of tone, down you go.
Whatever position, basic position she was in at the point of the gunshot wound is the position she would have been in from that point forward, as long as there was no outside influence on her body, correct?
I'm not sure that I can go that far. I can, for example, see a situation where she might have been partially out of the chair, standing even, and at the time of the gunshot wound could have fallen back in the chair. So I can't say it was identical to the position that she was found in. My examination of the brain and cord would not be able to help me with that.
All right, let me give you a hypothetical. Assuming that other blood spatter experts have testified that the spatter in the chair and on the chair basically suggested that she was in the position that the photograph showed her in, with her head behind the plane of the armrest of the chair, her legs outstretched in front of her. If she suffered that gunshot wound, she would not move her hands, arms, legs, head, one way or the other, cough, sneeze, spit, anything like that. Based on that injury, she would simply basically die in the position that she was in, correct?
Improper.
Overruled.
Again, maybe I'm overcomplicating this, but the head could have been upright and then fallen to one side or another. The arms could have been in a different position and then collapsed. So maybe that's cutting hairs too much, but I don't know that I can exactly say she was in that position.
You're not cutting hairs at all. That was my original question. Assuming that her hands may have been up, they could have fallen just from gravity, correct?
Yes.
Assuming that her head was up, the way that we normally have our heads when we're awake or conscious, that could have lolled to the right, correct?
Either side, downward, backward, depending on the exact position.
But if in fact, I guess my question ultimately is this: once she suffered that wound, once she suffered that transection of her spine, she was not spontaneously, volitionally moving any part of her musculature, correct?
I'm trying to think if there's any exception to that statement. The heart muscle would continue to beat.
Okay.
There's a possibility that some of the autonomic functions, such as peristalsis in the abdomen, those are smooth muscles, of course, those can move. As far as skeletal muscles that move the arms and legs, breathing muscles, I don't believe those would have been moving.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good morning, doctor. Just briefly regarding your background, I wanted to touch on just a point or two. At some point in your career, you became a board-certified forensic pathologist. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was in 1999, somewhere in that area?
Yes, sir. After I finished the fellowship at the Department of Coroner here in Los Angeles.
Okay, and a fellowship is sort of like an internship, only you're already a doctor and they call it a fellowship. And basically you learn how to do something.
Yes, same type of position, same types of functions, same types of supervision as if I had just finished a pathology residency.
Okay, and for example, if one early in their career goes into the field of pathology and they do an internship in pathology, then they can do an internship or they can learn how to do forensic pathology by going to a medical examiner's office. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And
if
you did
an improved program, yes.
Okay, and you did it a little differently. You did it later in your career in 1999. Is that
That's
true?
quite differently.
Yeah, okay.
I would say.
And after you had done your work in sleep disorders and all of that work that you've done, you decided to move into the field of forensic pathology, and you chose the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office to do that, I take it. Is that correct?
Well, I had had the experience at the State of Utah Medical Examiner's Office prior to that and was acting as a forensic neuropathology consultant there based on my neuropathology training.
Okay.
But to formally do it and to get the formal training, I elected to come here and do it as a fellow so that I could be eligible for board examination. Yes, sir.
Okay, and when you do did this fellowship that ended in 1999, that's where you were actually doing day-to-day autopsies under supervision, is that correct?
Well, that was after I'd done autopsies under supervision in other settings,
Okay.
and without supervision, by the way, when I was on faculty at University of Utah.
Okay, like in a medical hospital setting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a little different than the forensic autopsies that you do at the medical examiner's office, is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in 1999, you went through this fellowship where you did forensic autopsies, and then you became a deputy medical examiner for the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and then for a period of time you did autopsies, and then you transitioned into just doing neuropathology consultations, is that correct?
Forensic neuropathology consultations on cases referred by the other deputy medical examiners, yes, sir.
Okay, so how many years, and you mentioned that Dr. Lakshmanan took you off the pathology autopsy rotation and just had you do consulting in neuropathology after a period of time, and how long was that you were doing the regular autopsies as a deputy medical examiner?
I think that it was a few months after board examination was completed and passed. I don't remember the exact date, sir.
Okay, so you did autopsies after you became board certified for a few months, and then you became a neuropathology consultant where you basically focused on a particular specialty area of the autopsy, is that correct?
For that office, yes. I had done similar work prior to that, of course, but that was where, at this department, my work was limited to that very narrow area.
Okay, now I want to talk about when you were just doing regular forensic pathology autopsies when you were board certified.
Yes.
Essentially, you did that for a couple of months, and did you do any inside-the-mouth gunshot wounds that were self-inflicted? Did you ever do any autopsies of people that suffered those types of wounds?
I don't remember whether I did them myself or saw others. We would share cases in there. I believe I had a couple, but they were not the exact type that we have in this case. They were shotgun wounds or high-powered rifle wounds, and I don't remember a specific case exactly like Ms. Clarkson, no, sir.
Okay. I'm not asking you if they were the same or similar, just inside-the-mouth gunshot wounds. You have some experience in doing autopsies, or do you not in these type of cases?
Yes, I do, but it was very limited, and most of the time it was seeing other people's cases.
Okay.
At the same time I was doing an autopsy on another case.
Okay, and in this particular case, and since you transitioned from doing autopsies for this 2 to 3 months, with the LA County Coroner's Office, the neuropathology, you would just do specific work with either the brain or the spinal cord as part of the overall autopsy that would be done in a case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you go to Orange County, you basically do the same thing. And sometimes you go and do your work and you don't even go to the autopsy itself. Isn't that correct?
Most of the time I do not go to the autopsy myself.
Okay, and there's been some testimony here from Dr. Pena as far as the way that the medical examiner's office works here in Los Angeles County is that typically or usually the pathologist who does the autopsy does not go to the scene under a usual scenario. Is that your understanding also?
During training, I went to several scenes. I think that after training, when we're on the full-time staff, it's unusual to go to scenes, although it does happen from time to time.
Okay, so you don't have a lot of experience other than maybe in your training where you went to a few scenes to going to scenes of death. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and when you were involved in this case, you were involved because Dr. Pena asked you to do a consultation regarding the neuropathology issues that he wanted you to address. Is that correct?
Well, it's not quite. He actually called me to come down at the time of the autopsy and examine the case during the removal of the brain and spinal cord. So I did see a portion of the autopsy, but then I had no further contact with the case until after the formalin fixation of the brain, which takes about 2 weeks. And then I did my examination in the brain and spinal cord as was documented.
Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about that as far as what you did. At some point, kind of later, or as the autopsy had already progressed, Dr. Pena asked you to come and look at the spinal cord and the brain. Is that correct?
No, this was a situation where he called me before the scalp was removed and the head opened. And so I was able to see that sequence of events, watch the head being opened, and assist with the removal of the brain and the spinal cord.
And just so I understand, you knew from your attending the autopsy, in fact, Dr. Bodden was there when you were there, is that correct?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And Dr. Pena was there and some other people were there, and there were photographs taken of the autopsy procedure, correct?
Correct.
And you knew from what they told you when you arrived that this was an inside-the-mouth gunshot wound, or did you not know that?
I didn't know the specifics about that. I didn't know whether the gun had been outside the mouth, within the mouth. I don't think that had been decided at that time, at least in the conversation that I heard. I had no preconceived notions.
Okay. In any event, did you look at the bullet track as being inside the mouth, straight back in an upward trajectory? Did you learn that from Dr. Pena or Dr. Bodden at all?
Only later. I was looking at the interior of the cranial vault and looking at the transection of the spinal cord at the level of the medulla as it was removed, because I was assisting with that. I did not follow the entire bullet path. I did not look inside the mouth at that time.
Now, Dr. Andrews, with reference to your work as the neuropathologist, you looked at the tissues of the brain and the spinal cord as it related to this case and authored a report. Is that true?
And the dura mater.
Okay, and you mentioned in your discussion with Mr. Jackson here that there was some brain swelling that occurred, and you know from your experience that if somebody is completely dead, their brain doesn't swell. Is that correct?
If by completely dead you mean the heart is not beating either, there's various definitions of death. But it meant to me that there was some continued heartbeat in circulation after the gunshot wound occurred.
Okay. And that would, did you ever tell Dr. Pena that the heartbeat could have beat for several minutes after the gunshot wound?
I don't remember having that specific conversation with him.
Do you recall ever being present when Dr. Pena had a discussion or was having a meeting with somebody where that issue was discussed?
I was at least one or two meetings in the months after the autopsy. I don't recall the specifics, and I don't recall whether that specific issue was raised.
Okay, you don't quarrel with that proposition that the heart could have beat for several minutes. In fact, brain swelling and bleeding throughout the brain in other areas other than where the bullet went through occurred. Isn't that true?
I believe the heart continued to beat for a time after the gunshot wound, yes, sir.
And there was bleeding in areas of the brain where that could not have occurred unless the heart was beating and there was some circulatory activity. Isn't that true?
I think that I would phrase it a little bit differently, if I might.
Okay. Let me ask you this question.
I'm sorry, I'm going to object. I'm not sure if you
Did you want, as part of your answer, do you need to explain something?
Yeah, if you need to do that, just tell us. And
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
how would you phrase it? Let me ask you that.
Yes, I think that you can have the effects of the initial gunshot wound, and that can cause some disruption of vessels, and you can get some bleeding that's relatively limited very, very quickly. On the other hand, that the longer the heart is beating, and swelling can occur, the lack of oxygen and so on can cause leakage in other vessels, so you can get secondary effects later that are superimposed on the original injury. So it's a very complex issue.
You documented in your report in several areas of the brain swelling. Is that correct? Brain swelling?
I believe I stated that there was mild swelling that was in the cerebrum, and that there was moderate swelling in the cerebellum. There was some swelling, of course, on each side of the transected part of the spinal cord and lower medulla.
Okay. And when you looked at the transected spinal cord, you actually looked at, there was different types of injuries to the spinal cord. In other words, you characterized them differently. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you mean, sir.
One word you used is pulpified. Oh, that word, is that correct?
Yes, I probably did. I'd have to look at my report.
And then the other one was torn or ripped or torn, some words like that. Pulpified and then in part and torn where the bullet hit the cord. Is that correct?
I would have to look at my report, but I'll take your word for it. Those words
Do you
are-
have your report here? Would it, maybe during a break you could take a look at
I
it?
brought a copy of my report.
Okay, I'll give you a page reference, and at the break you could take a look and see if that's correct. Dr. Andrews, in your discussion with Mr. Jackson, you talked about injuries that occur because of or secondary effect injuries, and you're talking about the injuries that occur because of the blast that occurs from gases from the gunshot wound. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. Are you talking about only injuries that occur as a result of the bullet itself?
No.
Do you have any special expertise or understanding of the blast and explosion that occurs if somebody discharges a firearm inside their mouth with their lips gently closed around the barrel? Do you have any? Do you know what happens?
Define what you consider to be expertise.
Well, in other words, do you know the gas pressures involved? Do you know the effects of that based upon your experience doing these 2 to 3 months of autopsies?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. That's beyond the scope of direct examination.
I'll allow it. It goes to his expertise. Overruled. You may answer.
Well, first, I'd like to correct a misstatement you made. I have done autopsies more than 2 to 3 months.
Okay, whatever autopsies you've done. Sure.
And the answer also is through my own experience of seeing these types of wounds and my review of the English language literature in the course of writing the gunshot wound chapter for our book that you're familiar with. I reviewed a considerable amount of literature, so I believe I have some expertise in that. Whether it's equal to others, more or less, I can't answer that.
Okay, and this book that Mr. Jackson held up yesterday is a book that you co-authored, and you're familiar with basically the whole book since you're one of the co-authors, I take it. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then you also mentioned that you provided Mr. Jackson with some articles, some medical journal articles that support your position on the various subjects, and you talked about those as you went through your testimony, correct?
Yes.
And both your book and these articles, they reference authorities or medical documentation that support the points in your book as well as in the articles that you provided. Isn't that true?
Yes, that's what we tried to do, sir.
Okay, and you mentioned this gunshot wound chapter in your book. You mentioned a number of times and cite a number of times the work done by Dr. Vincent DeMaio regarding gunshot wounds. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and in fact, you state in your book, and we got it just this morning, we looked at it, that he is the authority in the field of forensic pathology on gunshot wounds and injuries and damage caused thereby. Isn't that true?
I don't believe that was my exact wording.
Pretty close, though, wasn't it, Don?
No, I suggested it as a very good reference and a good starting point for a broad overview of the subject. I believe it's a very good book. As far as being the authority, I think that most of the time when an attorney uses that term, he's indicating that I'm supposed to view that book as the only gospel on that particular subject, that it goes well beyond anything that I've personally observed or read anywhere else, that absolutely no other reference is needed, and even if it goes against common sense, that is the only reference book, no other is needed. And if by authoritative that's what you mean, I absolutely do not agree with that.
Okay. Let me read this statement to you, Dr. Andrews. Quote, our most frequently used single source of information on this subject, however, is that by DeMaio.
Yes, I stand by that statement.
Okay. And that you actually wrote that, isn't that true?
I did.
Okay. And without equivocating and saying it's the final word or whatever that may imply, Dr. DeMaio is considered in the field of forensic pathology to be an authority on gunshot wounds in the field of pathology. Isn't that true?
Again, I'm not sure how you're using the word authority. I would consider him certainly at the forefront of those that are studying that subject. He's had a great deal of experience in that area, more than mine. I'd be the first one to admit. And I think that it is a very useful book that has a considerable amount of useful information. There would have been no need for me to write a gunshot wound chapter for our book if it had everything that I think is important in it. And so I tried to expand on one area or another during the course of writing my chapter, and tried to put a little different slant on some of the things that we are frequently asked by deputy medical examiners that were not covered in Dr. DeMaio's book, just as one example.
Okay, so your gunshot wound chapter in your book, you made the statement that, quote, "it also contains considerable information relevant to the neuropathology of missile wounds." You made that statement also?
I did, yes,
Okay.
I believe that.
All right. And you referred to Dr. DeMaio's treatment of gunshot wounds and the issue of neuropathology as being used the word DeMaio's excellent, and then you used the words monograph. I don't know what is...
Monograph is a single subject book. In other words, it wasn't a comprehensive book on all of forensic pathology.
And basically, your treatment of Dr. DeMaio's reference regarding gunshot wound writings and so forth, basically, when you use the word monograph, you're saying that particular subject, but that doesn't include all of neuropathology, isn't that correct? There's other areas of neuropathology that don't have anything to do with gunshot wounds, isn't that accurate?
State that again, sir.
That was a very poor
I'll give you
question.
an opportunity when we come back for our recess. Keep in mind the admonishment, 15-minute recess. Thank you.
Why do I have... Oh. I was going to say, why is the screen purple? Because StreamYard's being a butthead, that's why. Quit buffering, come on.
All right, back on the record. All parties except the jurors and alternates are present. Yes.
Your Honor, I asked for just a moment before being adjourned. We brought a witness in this morning, Fireman Sturdy, and I've spoken with Mr. Dixon, Mr. Jackson, and asked if we could just put him on and interrupt the testimony. It's not long, it's very brief. It's taking rebuttal to what firefighter Liverpool said about the call and Ms. Clarkson being on the influence on that Christmas Eve. And they've indicated they don't want to break the doctor's testimony.
Okay.
And he just informed me that they're down in a lapse, and I'm just asking if we could just put him on. I can't imagine he'd be more than 10 or 15 minutes at the most.
We really need more time to look at some of the new information with this doctor anyway.
Well, that may be, but I think we need to move forward and then see where we're going. I think the people have a right to, in this case, they presented a witness, you're cross. This is a witness to their case. It's very obvious as to keep this testimony ongoing. So respectfully to the firefighter, I'm going to deny your request.
I mean, I just leave the court for a moment to explain this.
There's another matter, Your Honor,
Yes, Mr.
goes to discovery. Prior to the witness testifying, he had received on Friday a one-paragraph essentially offerings, and as of I guess it was yesterday morning, we received what appears to be an incomplete CV. I'd like to mark these as court's exhibits just to make them part of the record, if I may.
Sure.
Actually, just for the record, it was 3:30, 4 o'clock on Monday, not yesterday morning, that we got the CV and about 100 pages of medical journal articles, and then we got the book I was referring to this morning, like 9:25.
And Your Honor, bringing this, and I'll hand this to the clerk if I may.
How do you want it marked?
As a court's exhibit,
I'd rather just take it, mark it as your next, which is X11.
All right.
I'm not sure where we are in court's exhibits.
What's the number?
X11.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay?
And it's 2 pages of material pertaining to Dr. Anderson.
Doesn't. I love this judge. I wish he could be the judge over every case. Over every case we do. He is amazing. Way back in the beginning of the trial, I tried to make it a short, and I couldn't get it to work right because StreamYard was being glitchy. And what I need to do is go back to the original feed, not the feed from my stream, and try to cut it into a short because it was so good. Because so many judges that we watch don't know how to control their courtroom, and they let the lawyers just run right over them. And it was Cutler who has missed a great big portion of the trial for some reason. I forgot why, but he was actually questioning a witness at one of the very first witnesses, and he was yelling at the witness and pointing, like screaming at her, and Fiddler went, "No, you will not scream at a witness." I mean, it was unbelievable. I've never, I don't think, ever heard a judge control a courtroom as well as this judge has. He is just, and he's lighthearted, sense of humor, but at the same time, he's decisive and in control, and they show him respect because they know if they step out of line, they'll get it. He's just the perfect judge. I have never felt this way about any other judge. There's always some negative, always, but he's perfect. They broke the mold when they made this man. He is the perfect judge.
And this is kind of to flesh out the issue that we addressed earlier in the week when Dr. Bodden, during his testimony that he was in the weekend, the doctor is here as a centerpiece of his testimony, the concept of spinal shock. Phenomenon prior to the time that he testified. And in addition,
Come on, StreamYard. See, this aggravates me. It'll work good for like 2 days and then it'll start just. Yeah, we do, Nancy. Yes, we do. He was an attorney on a federal court case? Oh, that's where he was. Okay. Yeah. I think you told me, but I didn't remember. I just knew that he was gone. But he quit before the case was over, right? So is he still there or is he gone yet? Okay, I have to reshare this because StreamYard cut my dang audio again. I guess I'm going to have to start cleaning the cookies and the cache every single time I turn the computer off, or right before I turn the computer off every day. Because I did it 2 days ago, it worked good for 2 days, and now it's getting glitchy again.
it was only within the last 2 days that we received several hundred pages of reports and articles that the doctor has referred to as not only that he considered, but he found supportive of his opinion. So we haven't had a time to completely vet those. And it was not until approximately 9:25 this morning that we received a copy of the chapter of his book that pertains precisely to the matter of his testimony. So that is, I'm making these statements for two reasons. One, to indicate that we are going to need at least a noon recess to continue to go through this material, but also to put this, I hate to refer to scales again.
Just keep the thumb off and you're fine.
Yeah, the scale that weighs failures to disclose evidence that the prosecution is offering. And I do think that we would have been entitled, we should have been entitled to that information, and we didn't get it. And I guess this goes into the generalized category of stuff happens, opinions expand, contract, and as the testimony goes on, material that hadn't previously been revealed is issued from the stand. And where I'm going with all of this is pointing on to Dr. Bodden's testimony. I'd like to just make a footnote that the same issue applies to Dr. Andrews' testimony.
Okay, thank you. If you care to reply.
Your Honor, the defense has had they're grasping at straws to try to even these scales that Mr. Brunon is talking about. It's ridiculous. Mr. Brunon and the rest of the defense team has been aware since we have been aware, since Dr. Bodden testified and had his aha moment that we were going to be consulting a neuropathologist. As soon as I found out the 4 points that we were going to be making in testimony, I reduced those to writing and gave them to Mr. Plor. Those 4 points are no reflex movements, which is exactly what the first point he testified to. The second was no decerebral rigidity. The third point was the lungs, the alveoli and the weight of the lungs. And the third was the transection of the spine. To say that every word or every phrase, medical phrase, that the doctor uses has to have been explored or put in writing or something, that's ridiculous. I mean, I didn't know the word neurogenic pulmonary edema either. But they knew that his testimony was going to be that there's other mechanisms for the weight of the lungs. That's what the part of the testimony was testified either. I mean, we can't reasoning of the doctor that there was no reflexive movements is not the same thing as what happened with Dr. Bodden. It's not even close. They have had full access to everything that this physician was going to testify to, including every one of the medical references that he backs his testimony up with, everything that we've had. I don't know in the chapters entitled spinal shock. I mean, it is what it is.
Well, and that's my point, is that these, the 4 points that Mr. Jackson refers to were revealed. There wasn't a shred of medical reasoning or medical support in his revelation. We're finding that out now, or we could have found it out if we'd all spent the last 48 hours reading the material that was provided at that time. This is all simply going back to the fact that not every the expert takes this. And I think Mr. Jackson has a self-inflicted wound, as we had about Dr. Andrews' 4 opinions that support the fact that he doesn't believe that there was post-trauma movement or breathing. That's the only point.
Well, normally I might let this just go, but I'm going to be very candid with you. You said, well, now, before you give this instruction concerning Dr. Bodden's testimony, now this is just the same thing. I'm going to say it again. No, it's not. Dr. Bodden's, the revelation concerning Dr. Bodden's testimony, and I found it then, and I find it now. It was deliberately delayed to gain a technical advantage. That's my ruling then. That's my ruling now. And I find that people were close. So that's my ruling.
That perspective.
The next court's exhibit is 62.
I was going to maybe get into it with the witness, so could we leave it as the defendant's next in order?
Yeah, if you want.
I may not, I just thought maybe I would, so let's keep
You
it
can
there.
leave it as X11 if you want, that's fine. Okay, let's proceed with the jurors and the alternates. All right, the jurors and alternates are now present, and you may proceed.
Good morning again, Dr. Andrews. I wanted to kind of continue where we left off. We were talking about gunshot wounds inside the mouth, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't get the sense that you're telling the members of the jury that you're an expert as to how much pressure is involved in that and what kind of destructive damage occurs from the explosion inside the mouth if a gun is shot by somebody inside the mouth. Am I correct in my understanding?
Not exactly. I would say that I can't give you a measurement of the amount of pressure. I'm not an engineer, and I don't know that sort of thing, but I do know the effects that it has on the mouth and around the mouth and in other parts. I do understand the wounding effect of the bullet in that area, yes.
Okay. As far as the amount of pressure notwithstanding, you know that when a gunshot goes off inside the mouth, there are gases that get released inside a closed environment. You used that word this morning. You understand that, correct?
I didn't use it with regard to the oral cavity because it's not a closed environment. No, I was using that specifically with regard to the cranial spinal cavity. Okay. That is a closed cavity, the brain and spinal cord surrounded by spinal fluid, so it's not an analogous situation. No, sir.
Okay. You don't, or do you claim to be an expert as to the amount of backspatter that comes out of an inside the mouth gunshot wound, something that comes out after the shot is fired? Are you giving any opinions regarding that?
Objection, Your Honor. This is beyond the scope of our direct examination and why we called this doctor to the stand.
He's just being asked if he's giving an opinion based on that. I'm going to overrule your objection. And I do believe it goes to his overall expertise, and he may answer the question yes or no, depending on what the appropriate answer is. You may answer.
Please restate the question, sir.
Inside the mouth gunshot wound, do you claim to be an expert as to the backspatter, tissue, blood, residues from the shot itself that come out of the mouth after the shot is fired? Do you claim to be an expert as to that?
I'm familiar with the subject. I've included that in my chapter, and I've referenced appropriate references. Do I consider myself an independent expert in that area and having, in the sense of being an expert, done personal experiments on it? No, sir.
Okay, you've researched it and you put that in your book. Is that true?
Objection.
Yes.
This is beyond the scope and it's irrelevant for this.
No, excuse me. You put forth that he did write a book, and based on certain expertise, he can be cross-examined on that as far as I'm concerned, as long as it's within certain parameters. I find it's within the parameters.
You, in your book, you mentioned in your testimony this morning an authority on this backspatter or material. You mentioned somebody that that published articles in Germany by the name of Karger. Is that correct?
That's referenced in my book, yes, sir.
Multiple times, is that correct?
Karger is mentioned multiple times. I can't remember whether that specific article was referenced multiple times.
And this Karger has done a lot of research and published in the field of gunshot wounds and on a number of subject areas, and you cited him as an authority in that regard. Isn't that true?
No, I cited him as an important researcher in that area. Again, I don't like the word authority because it can be used so many ways.
Okay.
But I was I think, favorable in my comments regarding Dr. Karger as I was with regard to Dr. DeMaio. Dr. Fackler is mentioned several times in the book.
Dr. Leetsma?
Dr. Leetsma is mentioned in my book in more than one chapter, yes.
Dr. Spitz, more than one chapter.
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay. Now, Karger has done research specifically on gunshot wounds and their effect on the body, including the head. Is that true?
In calves, yes.
Okay, and you cite those cases as being a risk. Now, I sense you're uncomfortable. You cited him. And in order to cite something in a reference, you have to believe that it's a valid authority to cite. In other words, that you're not going to cite somebody that doesn't prove what they propose to prove in the article that you cite them in. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. A citation might be for a completely different purpose. And for example, in the chapter on the suspected child abuse case, I cite many references specifically for the purpose of indicating that there's controversy in the area. Some opinions supported by fact, as one would wish to achieve. If we were going to consider that, the be-all and end-all on that particular subject, and I specifically make the point in that and other chapters that one has to be very critical and try to review those with the idea in mind that this might be useful information, but also measure it against your own personal experience and information from other sources. In many of these chapters, we cite a variety of sources that one should use.
As far as Mr. Karger, and this is a German author, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the references that you cite more than once is penetrating gunshots to the head and lack of immediate incapacitation. You cite that.
Yes, I think that two-part article is a very important one.
Okay. You also cite Karger a number of other times regarding blowback or backspatter that comes out of the head, depending upon where the wound occurs. Isn't that true?
Yes.
I need counsel to approach the bench.
Dr. Andrews, I want to move from Dr. Carter's publications to a related subject and ask you some questions regarding your opinions in this case as far as whether there was breathing or not, whether it was volitional breathing or not, whether there was lung blood in the alveoli of the lungs, etc. And I want to ask you this question. In any of the opinions that you gave today on direct examination, are you saying that no blood came out of her mouth when the gunshot was fired? Are you making any statement to that effect?
No, sir.
Okay, so that's not covered by your area. So now I want to move to your area that you've talked about, and that is what may have come out of her mouth after the shot was fired. In other words, after the initial blast and the material, tissue, blood that came out of her mouth. Is that, I want to focus on that. And but before I leave that, are you offering any opinion as to how far blood goes when a shot is fired?
He didn't testify to that. He didn't testify anything near that. It's
I'll
sustained.
move on. Dr. Andrews, with reference to your opinions, you mentioned that you got together with Mr. Jackson.
Another thing, he doesn't just say sustained or overruled. Like, he explains, like that. Like, he didn't testify to that. Nowhere near to that. Sustained. It's totally understandable. We're not going, what in the heck just happened?
Recently to discuss your opinions, and was that last Friday afternoon?
No, I think that I had a meeting with him that was at the request of Dr. Lakshmanan. I believe he'd contacted Dr. Lakshmanan's office. It was about a week or more ago. And then we had a meeting yesterday.
Day before this.
The day before yesterday?
Today's Wednesday.
Today's Wednesday.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
But Monday morning, 9 o'clock, I had text, yes.
Okay. Did you meet with him last Friday afternoon or during the day at any time? Or did you talk with him at any time?
No, I talked with him. I did not meet him.
Okay. And when did you first start telling him your opinions in this case? Was it last Friday or was it after that?
No, it was, some questions were asked about the, whether I believed that breathing could occur, and I indicated no, I could not, but I did not go into any discussion at that point. That was at that first meeting that was arranged through Dr. Lakshmanan's office.
Okay. When was that? Just
Trying to remember, I think it was to check my calendar.
okay. So a week ago yesterday, approximately.
I'm guessing that would be about right.
Okay. When you say arranged by Dr. Lakshmanan, are you saying in some of the other attorneys in the case?
I don't know what the sequence was, but the way it should be is that the subpoena desk is contacted, and then they make the arrangements for any meetings. I don't know who was initially contacted. All I know is that Dr. Lakshmanan said that a meeting was to be set up at the request of Mr. Jackson, and that Dr. Pena was going to be there, and so on and so I attended it once I was informed of the time and the location.
Okay. And you mentioned that somebody had called and asked you to watch Dr. Lietzma's testimony, and you did that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Most of it. I didn't see every minute of it.
Okay. Was that Mr. Jackson that asked you to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's whenever Dr. Lietzma, was that the day before his testimony or thereabouts?
Again, I'd have to look at the calendar, but I think it was very close proximity to when Dr. Leishman was expected to be testifying.
And then you, as a neuropathologist, were asked to watch Dr. Baden's testimony in addition to Dr. Lietzma. Is that also correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And also by Mr. Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that a separate request or the same request? In other words, was it made at the same time or different?
I don't recall. It may have been at the same time. I don't recall the specifics of that.
Okay. So what was
Yeah, Jennifer, closing arguments are today and the other one.
your understanding as to why you were being asked to watch Dr. Leitzman and watch Dr. Boden's testimony?
The possibility that I might be called to testify, but that it had not been decided. It would depend in part on what other witnesses, such as Dr. Leitzman and Dr. Boden, said, that there might be no need for my testimony. And it wasn't, in fact, until Monday that I was told, yes, you are going to be a witness in this case, and was asked to provide some documentation to verify my comments as far as did I think there were reflexes and so on, and so I provided those.
Okay, and you knew Dr. Leitzman. I think you mentioned in your direct testimony that you actually were at something with NIH at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine in New York, and he was also there?
Yes, Jan Leitzman and I were both fellows under Dr. Robert Terry's supervision at Albert Einstein College of Medicine the same year. We had a very good year there, and I enjoyed working with Dr. Leitzman. We actually published an article together.
Okay, and and you actually referenced Dr. Leitzman's book on forensic neuropathology a number of times in your work. Is that true?
Yes, that was, I believe, the first monograph that really dealt in any depth with that subject, and it's been a very useful book for many years.
Okay. Dr. Andrews, with reference to your opinions in this particular case, when did you first use the term spinal shock as it relates to your meetings with Mr. Jackson? Was it in Monday's meeting? Was it conversations Friday or earlier?
I don't remember that. I know it came up at the time the discussion was much more nebulous as to, whether I agreed with all of the statements made by Dr. Leitzman and Dr. Boden, and I indicated that many of the things they testified to I could agree with, but there were certain things that I could not.
Okay. And just so that we know where the disagreements begin and end, basically you're disagreeing with the notion that there could have been any breaths in or out after the shot was fired relating to Miss Clarkson, is that correct?
I don't see how that could have happened based on the testimony that I've just given. Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to know if I'm correct in understanding where you disagree. Shallow breaths in, but no exhaling. Would you agree or disagree with Dr. Pena if he made that statement?
If he made that statement, and it was not after asking my opinion on it,
But you would agree with Dr. Pena that's possible, is that correct?
and no.
Okay, and if Dr. Pena stated that under oath, that he had made that statement, or that he had that opinion, you just simply disagree with it, along with Dr. Leitzman, Dr. Boden, some of their opinions regarding inhaling or exhaling breaths.
Objection. That's a compound question. That there's three different individuals and they all had differing opinions. I don't think it can be answered singularly by this witness.
I want to allow it, just assume that they all testified this. If they don't, then it goes to the weight of the hypothetical.
That's a good point.
Okay? If they all testified to that, would you agree or disagree with it?
That there were one or two breaths after the gunshot wound, is that the specific statement you're referring to?
Yeah, Mr. Jackson has a good point. They all said that there could have been some inhalation or exhalation. Well, excuse me. Dr. Pena said there could have been two breaths of inhalation, but no exhalation. In other words, no breath, no air coming out. First of all, do you agree or disagree with that notion?
If that was a statement, then I would not be able to agree with it.
Okay.
No.
Now, the other experts, and we're not talking about volitional breathing. We're talking about breathing after the injury to the spinal cord, that there could have been some inhalation or exhalation of breaths. Do you, if any other expert said there could have been any, regardless of how it was done, you would disagree with that, I take it?
Regardless of how it was done, no. If someone compressed the chest and was doing CPR, certainly there could have been some movement of air under those circumstances, so I can't agree with that statement.
Okay, let's exclude CPR. That's not on the table. In other words, excluding CPR, any inhalation or exhalation of air from Ms. Clarkson's lungs, you would disagree that that could ever occur after this injury that she suffered. Is that correct?
It's my opinion that that did not occur.
Okay. And just so we understand where your opinions differ, with reference to Ms. Clarkson, you at some point looked at these lung slides regarding the blood in the alveoli. Is that correct?
Yes, just a few days ago.
And when did you first tell Mr. Jackson about doing that?
This morning.
Okay. And you looked at these slides, and did you compare what you saw in the slides with what was in Dr. Pena's autopsy report as to how he described that?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you see blood in the alveoli?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Was it widely dispersed in various slides?
It was variable in different alveoli, and I think that the amount is going to vary depending on exactly where Dr. Pena was taking his specimens. I wasn't there at the time of the specimen taking, so I have no idea as to what the sampling criteria were or what he was looking for specifically.
Now, as far as giving an opinion as to whether there could have been inhalation of blood that ended up in the alveoli, you came to that opinion before you looked at the slides. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So looking at the slides didn't change your opinion in one way or the other, did it?
No.
Okay. You, Dr. Pena, for the slides, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, you mentioned in your testimony as far as the effect of the injury on Miss Clarkson that the bullet is so wide and the spine is so wide. Is that correct?
No, the spinal cord I was specifically referring to, not the bony spine.
The spine and the spine and the spinal cord, as it gets closer to the brain, actually widens a little bit. Isn't that true?
No, that's not true.
Okay. Does the bullet size and the spinal cord, do you know whether it hit directly center, off to one side, off to the other?
Lord, take an anatomy class. Dang, every question, like the last 15 minutes. No, that's not correct. No, that's not correct.
Other side, do you have any idea how the spine was transected?
Yes.
Okay, and was it a straight-on hit, or was it off to one side or the other, or do you know?
It was so close to central that it was able to hit the occipital sinus behind the spinal cord, and that's in the midline. So it may have been a millimeter off, millimeters off. I can't testify as to the exact distance, one side or the other, the angle, but it was very, very close to central midline.
And with reference to the size of the spinal cord for Miss Clarkson, you didn't measure that. You're actually going on a standard measurement for an adult. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so there is some variance in that. Is that true?
Yes, it's in the article that I mentioned and that you have a copy of.
Okay, and is it also true that you cannot say to any reasonable degree of medical certainty that, in fact, the entire cord was severed at the time? It may have made it. In other words, it could have occurred during transport and later on. Is that true?
Based on my analysis of the situation, it's my opinion that it was completely transected, but in follow-up to that, I gave you testimony and references to indicate that even if it wasn't, it's irrelevant because the amount of damage that would have occurred several beyond.
You're saying that even if it wasn't completely transected, you're saying it wouldn't have worked. Basically, it wouldn't have conducted neural activity from the brain to
Correct.
the lower extremes. Okay, but can you state, let's start with just this proposition, if I'm understanding your testimony, can you state that it was completely transected at the time the shot was fired?
I would say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, but to, is it impossible? I think like many people realize there's very strange things can happen, and could there have been a thread on one or the other side of either the coverings around the spinal cord, the pia arachnoid, or a few neural structures that were fragmented on one or the other side? No, I don't believe I can go that far, sir.
Okay. Now, with reference to your discussion about spinal shock, the article that you provided talks about that, one of the articles that you submitted to Mr. Jackson the other day. Isn't that true?
Which article are you referring to, sir?
An article called Spinal Shock in the Mayo Clinic Proceedings, the author's name. And did Mr. Jackson ask you to get these articles, or did you get them on your own at his
Well, most of them, since I was writing various book chapters that needed those references, all of them, except Atkinson and Atkinson, had many of those articles for months or years. It wasn't necessary to go to the library. I took the additional precaution since it became apparent that testimony would be probable to go to the UCLA library a few days ago and do a bit of a literature search and see if I could find anything more recent that might be pertinent. And I selected the Atkinson and Atkinson because even though some of the others briefly allude to these rare exceptions that can occur after complete cord transection with regard to cutaneous reflexes, the very brief momentary severely depressed reflex at the knee and so on. I thought the Atkinson article was the best example of that, and so that should be used to indicate these rare exceptions with regard to breathing and so on. But I wanted everyone to be aware that, you know, nothing is 100%, or very few things are, and that these very rare exceptions occur even though they're not relevant in this case.
Okay. Now, Doctor, you agree that if somebody receives a spinal cord injury, typically, especially if they're not killed immediately, that the typical precaution is to immobilize the neck so that no further spinal cord injury would occur. Is that true?
That's true.
And that basically the concern is that there'd be some additional tearing or cutting of the spinal cord because bones could be broken or displaced, and that just transporting a person or moving a person could cause more severe spinal cord injury. You agree with that general
concept? Yes, I agree with Dr. Bowden's statements on that.
Okay, and I take it that your testimony is that even though you believe that the spinal cord was completely transected, if there wasn't a complete transection, then this spinal shock would have rendered the spinal cord ineffective in any event. Is that true?
Well, number one, that's part of the answer that I gave. The spinal shock plays a role. The second part of it, however, is the damage out beyond the permanent wound cavity that the Omican article specifically refers to, and my own experience of viewing gunshot wounds in the central nervous system. And so both of those are the injury to the nervous system.
When you talk about people that experience gunshots, are you talking about people that survive them, like let's say in a wartime situation where a soldier is injured and there's a shot through this and it causes damage to the spinal cord, those types of situations?
Please restate the question. I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Well, sometimes somebody gets shot and they receive a spinal cord injury because the bullet causes a problem with the spinal cord, correct?
Yes.
Sometimes, if it's full, basically it's a section person dies, essentially. Is that correct?
Depends on the level. If below the level where breathing muscles are involved, then they can continue to breathe and they will not die initially. Okay. They may bleed out or have other injuries, but no, they don't necessarily have to die, immediately.
Some of them actually survive those injuries. Is that true?
Depending on the level, yes, sir.
Okay. And if it's above the area where breathing occurs, sometimes they get shot and it doesn't completely sever the spinal cord, but they end up living and they become disabled because of that. Is that true?
That can occur, yes.
Okay. And spinal shock, if spinal shock were to occur, then they wouldn't be able to breathe if the cord was rendered ineffective. Isn't that true?
That's true.
Okay. Now, one of the articles that you gave, this article regarding Atkinson's called Spinal Shock. This is the one I'm referring to. Is that the one you just talked about?
Yeah.
And it talks about up to several hours after the onset or the point of injury. You agree with that statement, isn't that true?
What it basically indicates is that the original injury need not be instantaneous. If it's rapid enough, and they indicate in there that even over several hours, that's rapid enough to, at least in some people, induce some degree of spinal shock.
In other words, the point of the articles isn't necessarily occur instantaneously. It could be up to several hours later, sometimes even days later.
No, that's not the point at all. You misinterpreted. What they're saying is the original cause of the spinal injury may have developed over hours and lead to spinal shock. But if there's a severe, particularly in the high spinal cord injury that's in a human, and it completely transects or physiologically transects, and I made the distinction between those two yesterday, spinal shock will occur. And if you refer to the DeTuno article, which again I consider the most detailed on this subject, they specifically used patients that had had complete physiologic transection at a high cervical level because spinal shock is so predictable and so severe in those cases, they were able to completely go through and identify the entire sequence of events in 4 stages of the return of reflexes after that predictable, instantaneous spinal shock occurs. So I don't agree with how you phrase the statement.
Okay, so the word induce is another word for start or the condition.
Cause of the spinal cord lesion and the subsequent development of spinal shock. These are apples and oranges. These are 2 different things. One's cause, one's effect.
Okay, I just want to know how you define the word induced. What does that mean? In the beginning or the start in some... I'm not putting it in any context at this point.
Okay, induced to me simply means that one thing causes another to occur. That's how I interpret that word.
Refers to?
I think so.
Okay, and that means let's say if somebody gets shot with a bullet, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and this statement is made in this article that you have referenced. Spinal shock may be induced up to several hours after the onset of injury. Do you disagree with that statement that was, in other words, did I read it correctly?
What type of injury?
Just ask if was that a statement in that article?
Objection today. Obviously, he needs clarification. And I would ask counsel to point me to the page number.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's actually, the discovery page is 25, 133, 385 of the
Thank you.
Andrew Atkinson article on spinal shock.
I think if you don't put it in context, it may be meaningless. Just to say, do these words appear without putting it in context doesn't mean anything. So you need to put it in context because that's the way the witness is going to answer.
Okay, let me ask you this question, Dr. Andrews. Does spinal shock always occur immediately after the injury-producing event?
According to their statement, it can start to occur enough so that it can be diagnosed clinically, even if the injury is occurring over a few hours. That's the import of the statement made. It depends, again, on what kind of injury. Is it a gradually enlarging hematoma or blood clot? Is it a ischemic lesion where the blood supply has been cut off and gradually edema occurs and you can get spinal shock? You're not specific, but I agree, it doesn't have to be instant. Where there was a rapidly developing lesion and it caused a transverse myelitis and spinal shock ensued. Now that plaque is going to evolve over minutes to hours as far as the physiologic effect, and I've seen spinal shock in that setting. No, it's not necessarily an instantaneous precipitating cause. So to that extent, I can agree.
Okay, so where you disagree is that with, let's say, a bullet wound, you're saying that that's instantaneous as a non-bullet wound or something like that. Okay.
That clarifies it.
And in your experience, have you been, as a death scene, where people report that people who have received spinal cord injuries by bullet wounds have been able to move their arms and legs, and in other words, that their movements have occurred after their shooting in. And we've actually gone to a scene and they got this person at some level. They're extremities that were affected by the cord.
I have not personally attended a scene of the type you described, no.
All right, so let me ask you a hypothetical question, Dr. Inches. Suppose that that does occur. In other words, that a pathologist goes to a scene and determines that there's a spinal cord injury and that there was some movement. Do you think that's possible?
I'm going to object. That's an incomplete hypothetical. It completely depends upon the type of injury.
Well, first of all, are you able to answer it the way it was asked?
Yes.
Is that your answer, or yes, you can answer it?
No, Your Honor, I can't answer the question, but that's not my answer.
Okay, go ahead and answer the question.
You said spinal injury. And
To the spinal cord, that's what I'm
a
talking about.
spinal cord?
Sure.
All right, how severe? For your hypothetical.
Let's just say either a partial or complete transection, either one.
I can't answer it if you're going to put
Depends on
both of those into the...
Let's start with partial.
How partial?
Half.
Half?
Right, half.
My goodness, half. I would be very skeptical that a gunshot wound that tore half the cord apart did not also cause physiologic disruption and some degree of spinal shock at the time of the injury. I would be very skeptical as to whether there could be any movements. Again, clinical pathological correlation is key here. In this hypothetical, there's not enough data to reach a firm conclusion.
Okay, and complete transection of the bullet goes through the spinal cord and completely transect. And would you expect that person could have any, first of all, volitional movement below the area that was where the cord was hit?
Is that part of your question?
Yeah, in other words.
No, if it was a complete transection, they would not have volitional movement below the level and very possibly for a few segments above.
And what about reflexive movements? In other words, non-volitional movements. Would you say that there is always none if there's a complete transection?
No, I didn't state that previously. In fact, I made a point to give you some exceptions to complete loss of all reflexes. There are some minor cutaneous reflexes that might occur. There was that incident that I mentioned that's from the 1800s in a couple of articles that I couldn't verify as far as decapitated people, that there might be a profoundly depressed knee jerk that lasts a few minutes. So I've already testified that that is not the case.
Okay. Now, Dr. Andrews, with reference to your opinions regarding the lungs and blood being in the lungs, you don't quarrel with the physical finding of blood in the lungs that was documented at the autopsy, is that correct?
I don't what with?
You don't question the fact that there was actually blood in. Did you read that in the autopsy report?
No, I didn't look at the lungs as they were being removed. I did see the slides, as I mentioned, and there was blood in alveoli.
Okay. How about the description of the lungs in the autopsy report? Did you review that?
I don't recall the details of that, no.
Issue with the lungs. Did you pick that up from Dr. Bodden's testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you quarrel with the fact that the lungs had more weight to them than they atypically would have?
Oh, I agree with them. They were heavier than normal, yes.
Okay. And that was any of the weight from blood being...
All blood in the lungs, and since blood has some weight, depending on how much is in there, it depends on how much weight there will be. Yes. Certainly that could have contributed to some of the weight.
Okay, now Mr. Jackson was asking you some physiology. Basically, the throat goes into the stomach, is that correct?
Well, one part of the pharynx goes into the stomach, yes.
And then there's
through the esophagus.
And then there's the esophagus goes into the stomach, and then there's the airway that goes into the lungs. Isn't
Yes,
that true?
trachea and bronchi. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
and there's actually a flap called an epiglottis
Yes, sir.
that stops and moves one way or the other depending upon whether you're breathing or you're trying to eat something, correct?
During life, yes.
Okay, and when the epiglottis is surrounded by chew and it moves voluntarily, correct? Nervous system, is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and if Miss Clarkson would have had a complete transition of her spinal cord, this epiglottis wouldn't be able to move at all. Is that true? That would be cut off in addition to other nerve fibers. You assume what you're saying is correct.
Well, there are some fibers that go from the nervous system through cranial nerve to go to the pharynx, and so there may be some cranial nerve fibers that are. My point was that with the type of wound that she had and the obvious evidence of secondary overpressure effects, I doubt very much that anything like that happened. I think much more likely, and to a reasonable medical degree of certainty, that she had traumatic apnea, even if all we considered was the intracranial wound.
Okay. Essentially, if somebody's deceased, the epiglottis basically stands up straight and it doesn't block either passageway to the lungs or to the stomach. Isn't that true?
Well, I wouldn't say it stands up straight. I know that there is access to both openings, whatever its position happens to be.
Both channels are open if the person is deceased, that the epiglottis essentially doesn't cover one or the other. Isn't that true?
I haven't seen it cover one or the other completely in my experience with autopsies, no, sir.
Okay. And that would mean that, and there was only one place by which there was active bleeding with reference to Ms. Clarkson's injuries, and that was the back of the throat where the bullet went in the back of her throat. That was the entrance. Is that true?
From my understanding from the testimony that I watched, I think that, I'm not sure whether both Dr. Liesma and Dr. Baden or just Dr. Baden made reference on more than one occasion to tongue laceration, and I believe you mentioned some other bleeding points or abrasions in the oral cavity. I don't remember the specifics, but that would mean that there was more than one potential source of bleeding.
Okay, so the back of the throat, some bleeding within the mouth based upon the lesions that would be there, but the blood would be coming from the mouth, would be going down the throat, basically. That's where the location would start, into the throat, the airway, and the stomach passage. Is that true?
No, it would actually be from the bullet hole in the oral pharynx, because that's what gave access to the spinal fluid that was bloody, and any vessels that were transected in the back of the oral pharynx there. So, you know, by mouth, if you include that, then yes, I would agree with that.
But mouth and back of the throat is what I'm trying to
Okay. Yes, sir, I
in
can
other words,
agree
the
with that.
combination of all of that could, and it would, including whatever spinal fluid might be there, it could go down the throat into the lungs. Passageways right next to each. Is that true? Because
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
right. And the way to demonstrate that that's accurate would be to look at both areas to see if there was blood in there, both the lungs and the stomach. Isn't that true?
Now that I can't be sure I agree with, because there might or might not be blood in both. It depends on if the esophagus had collapsed and was not allowing the blood to drain as easily there. It might go through the path of least resistance. It would depend on the position of the body. So I don't know whether blood was looked for in the gastric contents, so I can't say that in this case that was the case.
Did you look at that to explain your theory that gravity would cause this blood to go into the lungs?
Did I look at what?
Did you look at whether there was blood in the stomach?
No, I did not.
Okay. You assume there would be, wouldn't you, Don? Do you think that's a reasonable position for you to take if that were to be the case?
No, I think my position would be that it could go in either or both locations. It would depend on the exact position of the body, the direction of the drainage, and I certainly wouldn't exclude the possibility that it could get into the stomach too.
Did you read in the autopsy report, or did you hear Dr. Baden's testimony that there was basically just a brown liquid, no blood in the stomach?
Objection, that states the testimony.
I don't recall the testimony. Are you able to give me a citation whether that's the specific testimony?
Not a page, but I do remember him saying there was a brown fluid. He didn't describe blood in the stomach.
Okay, well, if you want to change your hypothetical.
Let me ask you this. Did you hear Dr. Baden's testimony regarding the contents of the stomach as you reviewed his, when you sat?
That may have been one of the times when I was out of the room because I don't remember that statement. No, sir.
Okay. Dr. Andrews, you talked about one other mechanism being that the movement of the body, the rough movement of the body afterwards, could cause some of the stomach contents to go out of the stomach, and referred to an article regarding that. Do you recall doing that?
I'm going to check. This states testimony. The doctor never said anything about rough movement of the body.
Okay, restate your question.
Do you recall talking about movement of the body, and that somehow would cause the gastric? Talk about the aspiration of that, and there's an article by a person by the name of Gardner that discusses that, using barium as a visual way to measure that and study that. Is that?
Oh, that's not what I said. Aspiration implies that active breathing is what caused it to get into the alveoli. Dr. Gardner's, and that was dealing specifically with regard to the issue of him putting barium in the stomach of people that were already dead, and then finding 24 to 48 hours later, with the usual way that the body is handled, to go to the mortuary, to go to the autopsy table, barium was in the alveoli. That was the statement, and it's such a eloquently clear and simple point in this case.
Doesn't Gardner actually say that there was barium after death? In other words, that went into the bronchi as opposed to the alveoli?
Say that it did not get into the alveoli, that it went only into the bronchi. That's a misstatement, sir.
Does he use the term gastric contents may reach the bronchi after death?
I don't remember that specific statement. I'll be glad to read it and see whether it's in the section that I'm specifically referring to or not.
May I approach, Ron?
You may.
Yes, that's in the initial part of the statement.
Can you point to the portion of the article that talks about the alveoli, using that term alveoli?
Yes, this section here where he talks about investigation. It's in the very next paragraph after the one that you highlighted, that statement.
Okay. And does he use the word alveoli, gets into the alveoli?
Yes, he does. And he actually has a photograph in there of an x-ray of the lungs that show an alveolar pattern of barium that is for further verification. It's a well-described pattern.
For the record, Counsel, are you referring to page 231?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Andrews, when you met with Dr. Pena, did he discuss with you his findings at the autopsy in your recent meeting with him?
I don't remember him specifically discussing that. I think that Mr. Jackson was actually asking the questions that I responded to do with my opinion as to whether a lot of the movements that had been described previously, in my opinion, could have occurred, and I indicated that I could not, and for the reasons stated in my testimony.
Okay.
Some of the things that he mentioned I did not disagree with. There were these few that I did.
Okay, so when you were listening to Dr. Leitzman's testimony about air being expelled out of the lungs non-volitionally after this injury occurred. You disagree with Dr. Leetsma's opinions as to that, as I take it. Is that correct?
If you're referring to his testimony that was with regard to gases from the gunshot wound going down into the lungs and sort of, as I understand, with a bellows effect, expanding the thorax, and then through passive contraction again, through the flexibility of the lungs, pushing blood and or tissue or something like that. I don't mean to misstate his testimony, but I'm just trying to remember the gestalt of it, the overview. I think that's a very interesting theory. I personally know of nothing in the scientific literature that would suggest that that could happen from a 2-inch revolver, even within the mouth. I would certainly be happy with that statement or others that you might disagree with if you will show me the scientific literature that provides any evidence whatever that that kind of bellows effect could forcefully push air out of the lungs under these circumstances. I'll be more than happy to review it and keep an open mind and then give you my opinion as to whether or not I think that that's valid or invalid. Up until that time, what you're basically asking me to do is agree or disagree with something that's never been proven, so far as I know. And it's an interesting thing, but I don't feel that I should be put in a position of trying to disprove the unproven. You know, show me some evidence. I'll be glad to evaluate it.
Okay,
All
so
right, on that note, we're going to take our noon recess. We'll be in recess till 1:30. Keep in mind the admonition. Thank you. 1:30. Thank you very much.
I like that expert. He's like, you're asking me to say something I can't say. Okay, let's go ahead and stop there. On Dr. Andrews Part 4. So we'll finish that on Monday. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry. Forgot the mic. So let's finish that on Monday. Let's do Part 4 of Dr. Andrews. I'm writing it down. Part 4, Dr. Andrews. So now, the moment we've all been waiting for, closing argument on the Widow's Words murder trial. Yay! You think they're going to find her guilty, guys? Sorry. Okay. So, Phil Spector, I've got yarn fibers in my mouth. Okay. I will see you guys in a minute for the Widow's Words murder trial. Closing arguments, charging conference, whatever. Part of today will be boring as usual because of jury instructions, but it has to be done so the jury knows what they're doing. And please join me again on Monday morning if you're not going to go with us to the trial. I will see you then. If you're coming with us, you will portal over there. Please keep all your hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times. Secure your belongings. Hold small children by the hand. And enjoy the ride. I will see you guys in a minute or Monday. Have a wonderful weekend. Here we go.